G'day everyone and welcome to video 4.2.8 for the Legal Studies Guide, where we continue on with methods or means of influencing law reform. Our quote today from Muhammad Ali. My kids in particular will know that I'm a bit of a sports buff, so very big fan of some Muhammad Ali quotes. I know where I'm going and I know the truth, and I don't have to be what you want me to be. I'm free to be what I want. And outside of someone who studies very, very hard, I just want you to always remember that you are free to choose your own path and be whatever you want to be. So today we are at 4.2.8, like I said, and we're continuing on our path of means or methods of influencing law reform. So in our last video, 4.2.7, we looked at demonstrations, petitions, and the role of the courts or the use of the courts. And this is just continuing into the role of the media in law reform. So in the old study design, methods of influencing law reform that you had to know were petitions, demonstrations, and media. So this is effectively a dot point that is from the old study design. So there's some old resources and some old examiners reports we can look at, but it has been given its own dot point because the role of the media is obviously increasing every day, particularly with social media. Our skill we need to have is we need to be able to analyse the influence of media. So we take analyse to mean look at it in depth, but also similar to petitions, demonstrations, and the use of the courts. We know that we're going to need to know the advantages and disadvantages of using the media, and we need to know examples as well. So I've got an example for you in here. Effectively, what role does media play in law reform? And we'll jump into it. So we define media, or we break media up, as they said in this dot point, and I'll go back quickly, including social media. So we're going to break it up into traditional media and then social media. So traditional media is things like television, newspapers, magazines, and other print media, effectively. So things like investigative journalism, commercials, talkback radio particularly, so still one of the widest used forms of media in the country, particularly as people drive cars and listen to the radio. Opinion pieces, letters to the editor in the newspaper, as well as just, again, investigative journalism, so on and so forth. The whole concept of how media influences law reform is this idea that it informs the public of the views that other people hold. It informs the public of ideas for law reform that are out there that might therefore get people to jump on board and further support the law reform idea. It is often used, therefore, in conjunction with other methods. So it is used to encourage demonstrations. It is used to encourage petitions that are out there and basically, again, give that information to people in the public about law reform ideas. It also has the I suppose a bit of a two-way aspect in that Parliament can use it to communicate back. So as we've seen in the last week with some of the Prime Minister stuff, the Liberal leadership in Parliament, the media has been often used to get the message across through press conferences, etc., about what's going on. So it basically can inform members of the public about law reform ideas. It can inform Parliament about the views of the public, and it can inform the public about what's going on in Parliament. So it serves that triple function, I suppose. And this is the whole idea that the real advantage of the use of the media is that it serves an educative function. It helps give people more information about both what's happening in Parliament, law reform ideas, the views of others. It can reach a really large audience. We know that, up to 1 million people might be listening to the radio every day during their commute. So it has that factor of reaching a large number of people at the same time, and it's super easily accessible. So nearly everyone has a TV, nearly everyone has a car that they have a radio in. So everyone has access to it pretty much, and therefore it's much more effective perhaps than demonstrations or petitions, which don't quite reach that large number of people. The disadvantages, though, the media can be really biased. I've talked to my class about this quite regularly. You can pretty easily pull up an article from, say, The Australian and an article from The Age about the exact same thing, and just look at things like how the headline's worded, etc., to see that the Australian takes quite a conservative, more liberal bias, right-wing biased approach to the way they report the news and report politics, whereas The Age takes a bit more of a left-wing bias, progressive, Greens, Labor-based approach to reporting the news. And depending on which one you read, you might actually only hear one side of the debate. So it can be very biased, and it can become easily saturated. You hear so many things on the radio, so many things on the TV, so many commercials, that effectively you stop taking it in. So whilst it can serve that educative function, sometimes there's just so much out there that you don't actually take any of it in. This is obviously exacerbated with social media. So the idea that the traditional media can be really biased is just taken to a whole new level with social media. So social media, we're talking about internet media, in particular Facebook and Twitter. So that whole idea of 24/7, individual updates from people, but now news sites particularly have a massive presence on Facebook and Twitter. Politicians are on Facebook and Twitter, and they're communicating back to people. But also other websites like GetUp, which is an activism website, really hated by the right-wing conservatives like the Liberal Party, because GetUp is very socially progressive and seeking to influence change in a lot of social factors that the Conservatives are against. Social media, again, is about informing and persuading others, so has that ability to inform, educate the public. But where social media moves away from traditional media is this idea of it's much more individual. So you can make a personal call to action through Facebook to your friends. If that gets shared out, that might get even wider than your friendship circle, to coordinate things like protest petitions, inform others about your views on public policy or law reform, encouraging individuals to lobby their local member of parliament, etc. You can do that yourself. Every single one of you who's watching this right now would probably, or maybe not all of you, but most of you would have Facebook, I'd say. And you can straight away jump on there and put out an individual call to action on something that you're passionate about. You can't do that through traditional media unless you are lucky enough to ring up the ABC radio and get through and be able to talk on air. Outside of that, the traditional media is quite closed off to the public. It's very curated. The editors choose what is presented. As soon as you're on social media, though, you have the individual ability to inform others, to put out calls for action. It's also this idea that, yes, there is a little bit of two-way communication from traditional media. Politicians can use it to communicate back to the public through press conferences and things like that. But social media allows that 24/7 two-way communication. Most politicians these days have social media managers who run their social media sites and actually, through comments and things like that, communicate directly back to members of the public. So this two-way communication has opened up dialogue with politicians that hasn't existed previously. Again, the advantages are that it reaches a large audience, that it serves an educative function, and that it is easily accessible. Social media is 24/7. Traditional media, not so much. Chuck on the TV in the middle of the night, and you're probably watching some horrible game show with hot dogs from Big Brother from many years ago, or YouTube it if you want, or you're watching some infomercials or television shopping, etc. Chuck on social media in the middle of the night and you're still getting updates from news websites. You're still seeing things your friends have posted. The other big advantage as well is this whole idea of two-way communication. Disadvantages, though, it is again easily saturated. It's even more saturated than traditional media, but also this concept of being an echo chamber. Generally, the people you're friends with on Facebook are people that have similar views to you, by and large. Therefore, you're not necessarily seeing alternative views, or you're not learning about other sides of debates, etc. You're just seeing views that confirm your own, so it echoes back to you a little bit. But also the way the algorithms work on Facebook, for example, you're obviously more likely to respond to and like posts that confirm your views and support your views. And therefore, the way Facebook works is it recognizes that. It says, yep, these are things that, Dan likes, so I'm just going to keep putting them in his feed. So all of a sudden, you're not actually necessarily getting informed of other views in the public. You're just getting information that confirms your own. And the quality of information can vary. I mean, hashtag fake news in the US, the US election a couple of years ago was a really big deal. This idea that anyone can post, like you can make up your own website and put information on it. And therefore the quality of the information can vary, and often you need to actually fact check stuff that you find on social media. There was a guy I think he was in Kazakhstan, and he was making a heap of money during the US election because he set up a website and he would post articles that had headlines like, Hillary Clinton linked to, pizza shop sex scandal. I think that was one of them, or whatever. Really provocative headlines, and people would click onto these articles and click into these links, and they'd go to this website, and basically the article would just be the headline and maybe one paragraph, and that was it. No evidence to support the claims or anything like that. But because they were so provocative and getting so many clicks, this guy was raking in and posting, 10 of these a day or more. He was raking in advertising revenue. He's making money from every click on his article, and he was sitting back in Kazakhstan with no interest in the US election, making heaps of money by writing provocative, basically wrong headlines about Hillary Clinton. The problem was people then started believing these. And as a result, this has some influence on the US election perhaps. So the quality of the information can vary. Our skill is that we need to analyse the influence of media using examples. So I've got an example for you, and this is the sort of question you might get with reference to an example: analyse the impact of media on law reform. So a great example is the Four Corners episode from 2011. This episode investigated the cruel treatment of cattle being exported from Australia to Indonesia. So they got some footage from Indonesian abattoirs of cattle having their legs broken with sledgehammers particularly. It's a pretty gruesome episode, but I'll include a link for it later if you want to have a look. But straight away created a large amount of public pressure to greater regulate this industry. It highlighted an issue that people weren't previously aware of, so served that educative function, and then the government responded. So they responded with some reform. They put in place stronger compliance regulations for exporters. So it's an example of investigative journalism and then a response. The VCAA examination report, the VCAR one from 2013, has heaps of information about the use of the media. I won't read through all of this for you, but it includes some more advantages, such as, politicians have media presence now, and some disadvantages. It may not overcome factors such as member conservatism, the idea of cognitive dissonance, where people are not willing to accept views different to their own, and that's just gonna further entrench and inform their own. So have a read through those, because that's obviously exactly what VCAR want. Exactly what they want to see in answers about the influence media can have. This is the response from Parliament to the live exports thing. I'll link you that. It's a bit in depth, but it shows you what they did. And this is the Four Corners episode if you do want to have a look at it. As I said, content warning, pretty gruesome. There's some, pretty interesting video evidence from Indonesian abattoirs. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to know the role media plays in law reform, particularly social media, and focusing on that whole idea that it helps inform and educate people of law reform issues. It might therefore grow support for a cause, but it also allows politicians to have that two-way communication, particularly through social media, knowing the advantages social media has over traditional media, but also the disadvantages around quality of information and saturation. Hopefully, at the end of this, you can answer this question of what role media plays in law reform. It's been another video for the Legal Studies guy. You can like, subscribe, rate, all those things, which I'd recommend you do. And we only have 5 videos to go, so almost done for the year. Happy studying.